today I am here at the Certified Hypnotherapy Training School with Dennis Parker and John Harmer, and we are going to talk about problems and issues that are facing Utah families and really families all over the nation. John, you are the chairman of a nonprofit, a nationwide nonprofit organization called the Light a Candle Society.
Correct.
And you guys are dedicated to eradicating pornography. You've had quite an illustrious career. Tell me a little bit how you started down this path.
The Light a Candle Society spent about $500,000 studying on how the human brain reacts to exposure to sexually explicit material.
Okay.
And we did a lot of studies with people live in magnetic resonance imagers. We were watching how the brain works when it's exposed to what we call fight or flight images. Mm-hmm. We didn't ever expose people to pornography, but we exposed them to scenes that would make their brain act the same way it would act if it saw pornography. Mm-hmm. We were the first people to show how sexually explicit material creates an addictive pathway in the brain. We could follow that path and see it. Uh-huh. Our whole strategy was that with that information, we could take the producers and distributors of pornography into civil court. Mm-hmm. We are not criminal prosecutors, but we take them into civil court, much like the tobacco cases, where the tobacco industry was successfully sued because they were causing lung cancer. Yeah. We could sue the producers and distributors of pornography because they were damaging a human organ called the brain with their material.
Kind of an important organ.
Yeah. And we, as I said, we spent over $500,000 just doing that work. Mm-hmm. We had a fantastic lawsuit ready to go. This was about 8 years ago.
Okay.
We had spent 3 years preparing the suit. We had the plaintiff, we had the evidence, we had everything we needed. Our last step was to test the community because we would have to have a jury. Mm-hmm. We wanted to make sure that we could have a jury impaneled who would recognize the fact that the material was pornographic.
Mm-hmm. And addictive.
And that destroyed our whole strategy because in a community as pristine as any community in the United States, as we interviewed people who would be prospective jurors, we found out that they said, well, I'm not sure that that's pornographic or not. What had happened to us, Holly, is that there was a transition of attitude toward sexually explicit material. And what 3 years earlier we had begun with as clear, absolutely clearly, under the law, pornographic material. Mm-hmm. In 3 years, public perception had modified enough. We weren't sure that with all the expense we would have, we could impanel a jury that would hold it was pornographic.
So it's a very scary issue, and it's something that, I mean, I have friends, I have, people who have had their families ripped apart from this addiction. It is a real addiction. It is a real problem. Tell me a little bit about what you've seen.
Well, Holly, how we got involved with Dennis Parker was the fact that we had been basing all of our material on what happens to the brain. And yet we could tell that even on all of the money we had spent, all of the study we'd done, we were missing some element. Mm-hmm. And finally it was Dennis who said to us, your problem is the brain and the mind are not the same thing. Mm-hmm. And we thought, this was an epiphany. All of a sudden we realized that we had been ignoring the fact, while the brain is a body organ, that body organ functions in a very predictable way. Mm-hmm. That body organ takes its orders from the mind, and the mind is what we were not working with. Mm-hmm. When we found out from Dennis what we were lacking, and I, from 51 years in this, I've worked with a lot of therapists who are trying to heal people from addiction to pornography. Usually, that would last 6, 7, 8 months. Mm-hmm. And within 2 or 3 months after the person was, quote, healed, unquote, they fall off the wagon, they're right back in the same place. But I have people always asking me, can you represent to us a therapist? Mm-hmm. Can you represent, it would always be, I have a friend who's in pornography. That meant it was my wife, my husband, my son.
Or yourself.
But it was a friend.
Yes.
Or yourself, yeah. So I'd say, here's a list of 3 therapists, 5 therapists. Give it to your friend, let your friend go to any one of these people.
But you didn't ever officially endorse anyone.
Oh no, quite the contrary. I felt a little hypocritical because these people, yeah, they mean well, they're well trained, they're very expensive, but they don't succeed.
They don't know what they're doing.
Somebody that, a common acquaintance said, you need to go meet Dennis because Dennis does in 5 or 6 weeks what these other therapists can't do in 5 or 6 months. So I said, Dennis, I want to watch you do this. Mm-hmm. And so he let me sit in 2 or 3 sessions. I was amazed.
Yeah.
I was overwhelmed with the way in which Dennis was able to get the person to get their mind in control of their brain so that they could overcome this addiction.
Wow.
And so for the first time in all of the years we've been doing this, I've endorsed a therapist, and when people ask me now, I don't give them a list of 5, I give them Dennis Parker's